The silence wasn't golden. It was the chilling calm before the storm. They said the drug war had ended. But what if that silence wasn't peace? What if it was control? Atlanta had always moved to its own rhythm, loud, fast, relentless. But when Marcus Caldwell stepped back into the city after 6 years behind bars, he didn't return to chaos. He returned to a kind of vacancy, as if the war he'd once fought had been replaced by something colder, cleaner, something far more dangerous. He had been a DEA agent, respected, sharp, relentless when he needed to be. But his final operation was a disaster. A raid that should have made his career ended in death, missing evidence, and a media storm that pinned the blame squarely on him. Excessive force, official misconduct. He went down hard. But he didn't remember most of it. Not the moments that mattered, just fragments, bright lights, distant voices, and then blank. Now he was free, technically, but something was missing. In his head, in his instincts, like he was still waiting for orders from a voice he couldn't hear anymore. At first, he thought it was just the wear and tear of prison, that 6 years of confinement had dulled his edge. But then he started seeing it in others. The streets were too quiet. Men who once ruled corners like warlords now ran laundromats, worked security, stocked shelves. They didn't just leave the life, they were different, tamed. Their eyes didn't burn the way they used to. Their hands didn't twitch with old reflexes. It was like someone had turned them down from the inside. And that's when he heard the name, the Ghost Cartel. Not a gang, not even a cartel really, more like a concept whispered through the underbelly of the city. No tags, no signs, no turf fights, just silence, and then compliance. He found Rico, one of his old street contacts. The guy had been unpredictable, quick with information, and quicker with a lie. Now, he barely blinked. Marcus asked about the Ghost Cartel. Rico didn't answer at first, just kept wiping the same spot on the counter. Then he looked up and something in his expression froze Marcus to the floor. "They don't come for your life," Rico said. "They come for what makes you, you." Marcus left that store shaken. It wasn't just street fear, it was vacancy. Rico was gone. The deeper Marcus dug, the more patterns emerged. High-ranking lieutenants from rival gangs suddenly dropping out of the game. Crime bosses relocating, retiring, or going underground without conflict. Not a single bullet exchanged. Not a single power struggle, just vacancy, then replacement. The whispers weren't about death, they were about extraction. Marcus began to remember things, not in order and not clearly, but enough. Flashes of white rooms, walls that didn't echo, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. He'd been held somewhere, off record, off protocol. It wasn't a federal holding cell. It was a lab. He remembered questions that didn't make sense, repeated endlessly. How do you respond to failure? What motivates your loyalty? What do you fear losing most? He remembered something being attached to his temples, the sensation of heat, not on his skin but in his thoughts, and a quiet humming noise, like something deep inside his brain was being dialed down. That wasn't interrogation. That was profiling, mapping, programming. And he wasn't the only one. Everyone who came back changed had something in common. A gap in time, a missing weekend, a lost month. They were taken, examined, and returned, less than what they were. But why? Why reduce the most dangerous men in the city to docile nobodies? And then the horror clarified. It wasn't destruction. It was harvest. The Ghost Cartel wasn't just eliminating threats, they were collecting them. Ruthlessness, strategy, loyalty, charisma, dominance. traits that couldn't be taught, but could be stolen. And they weren't storing them, they were transferring them into people on the outside. Marcus began to see it: CEOs with uncanny focus, politicians who seemed to command rooms with a force that felt unnatural, police officials who cleaned up districts not with brute force but with surgical precision. It wasn't luck, it wasn't genius, it was stolen instinct grafted onto the ambitious, the powerful, the useful. The Ghost Cartel wasn't trafficking drugs, they were trafficking human essence, stripped, extracted, and infused. Somewhere out there, someone else was walking around with Marcus's decisiveness, his combat intuition, his edge. And that's when the fear turned inward, because Marcus realized something terrifying. The version of himself that walked out of prison wasn't complete. He wasn't just forgetting, he'd been altered, smoothed, conditioned. He wasn't just an investigator now, he was evidence. And he was starting to feel it slip again, a fog creeping back in, numbness in moments where emotion should rise, compliance pressing at the edges of his will. The part of him that made him resist was fading. He had to move fast. He retraced every piece of his past, former agents, suspects, witnesses. Most were gone. The few who remained were shells. Some didn't remember him at all. Others simply didn't care. He eventually traced the operation to an old government contract, one never made public, hidden beneath corporate subsidiaries and shell companies. The facility? Underground, sterile, unmarked, but real. He broke in, and inside he saw it all. White rooms, reclining chairs with restraints, neural mapping rigs, wall-sized screens displaying emotional profiles like stock tickers, files, hundreds of them, each one labeled with names he recognized, and others he didn't. People harvested, people targeted, and people infused, a machine built to optimize society, not by uplifting, but by replacing. He confronted the director, the mastermind, a man who, on the surface, was a respected civic leader, anti-crime advocate, a public darling. But behind those polite eyes was surgical cruelty. The man didn't blink. "You misunderstand," he said. "We don't steal, we redistribute. We take destructive instincts and give them purpose. We take chaos and craft order. You were broken, Marcus. We made you better." But Marcus felt the lie burning in his chest. They hadn't made him better, they'd hollowed him. And now they wanted to hollow the rest of the world, one trait at a time. He destroyed the lab, but he couldn't destroy the system, not fully. The files were out there, the beneficiaries untouched, the donors erased. And even as Marcus walked away from the flames, he knew something was still missing inside him. Some part of who he used to be never came back. He'd exposed the truth, but truth wasn't enough. The Ghost Cartel didn't need loyalty or territory or guns. They had something far more powerful: influence without identity, perfection without origin. They were building a world where ambition had no conscience and humanity had no voice. And Marcus? He's still out there, watching, waiting. But every day, he forgets a little more of why. What do you think happened to the people who received those stolen traits? Do you think they knew? Or were they just better versions of themselves, never questioning where that power came from? Tell us what you think in the comments, and if this story left something cold in your chest, subscribe, because next time, we'll be uncovering a case where the pursuit of healing led to an irreversible fracture in the human soul. Stay alert, stay awake, and never trust the silence.